There was a moment when no one was watching you. No applause, no reassurance, no clear sign that anything you were doing even mattered. And yet you stayed. You didn't quit when quitting would have been reasonable. You didn't harden when bitterness would have been justified. You didn't shrink when pressure tried to rename you. That moment wasn't random. It was a test, and most people never realize they're in it until they fail it. You see, life doesn't test people when they feel strong. It tests them when they feel unseen. And the quiet strength you carried through confusion, delay, and disappointment revealed something about you that circumstances could not erase. You were being measured not by how loud you prayed or how confident you appeared, but by what you chose when the outcome was uncertain. That's always how heaven evaluates growth. Not by visibility, but by fidelity, not by speed, but by endurance. Scripture often points to this principle that what is done in secret shapes what is trusted in public, because purpose is never handed to impatience. You may not have known it at the time, but restraint was required of you. Silence was required of you. Obedience without explanation was required of you. And that is where many people fail. Not because they lack faith, but because they refuse process. They want promise without pressure, elevation without excavation, results without refinement. But you stayed present in the process even when it bruised your expectations. You kept your integrity intact when compromise offered you relief. You guarded your spirit when offense tried to give you an excuse to change who you are. That was not weakness, that was mastery. There is a reason growth often feels lonely. Development is private before it is visible. Even the foundations of a building are buried before the structure is celebrated. In the same way, your character was being strengthened under weight most people run from. And while others were being distracted, you were being prepared. While others were numbing themselves, you were learning discernment. While others were reacting, you were becoming stable. Stability is rare, and heaven values it deeply. God is not impressed by performance. He is pleased by alignment. When your actions line up with truth, even when your emotions don't, that alignment creates trust. Trust leads to responsibility. Responsibility leads to authority. This is why tests often feel repetitive. They continue until alignment becomes natural. And at some point, without ceremony or announcement, the test ends. Not because life gets easier, but because you are no longer ruled by the same pressures. You pass because you didn't abandon who you were when things didn't make sense. You may still be waiting for external confirmation, but internal promotion has already taken place. Something shifted in you. Your reactions changed. Your discernment sharpened. Your tolerance for dysfunction lowered. You no longer chase validation the way you used to because endurance taught you value. And value never begs to be chosen. It waits to be recognized. This is how purpose matures. Quietly, steadily, without spectacle, until the next responsibility requires a different level of sight. And now you're standing in a space that feels unfamiliar, not because you lost something, but because you outgrew it. This is often where confusion enters, because growth doesn't always announce itself with clarity. Sometimes it shows up as restlessness, sometimes as dissatisfaction with what once felt acceptable. But that discomfort is not rebellion, it's awareness. When you pass a test, the environment that trained you can no longer contain you, and transition begins before direction becomes clear. Many people misinterpret this phase and retreat thinking they made a mistake, but you're not regressing, you're recalibrating. Your standards are changing because your responsibility is changing. What once drained you now exposes itself quickly. What once entertained you now feels empty. That is not arrogance, that is maturity. Purpose always adjusts appetite before it reveals assignment. If God showed you everything at once, you would confuse preparation with arrival. So instead, He sharpens perception first. Notice how your tolerance for chaos has decreased. Notice how you no longer find peace in places that require you to silence your convictions. That's because inner authority has been established. Authority is not loud, it's settled. It doesn't need to argue. It doesn't rush to explain itself. It simply knows when something doesn't belong, and that knowing is evidence that something has already been entrusted to you internally, even if externally nothing seems to have changed yet. This is where patience becomes critical. Not passive waiting, but active alignment. The temptation here is to move prematurely, to force a door because standing still feels vulnerable. But timing is part of wisdom. Even Scripture reveals that seasons are not accidental. They are appointed. What you rushed into before required survival. What you are being led toward now will require stewardship. Survival asks, How do I endure this? Stewardship asks, how do I carry this without losing myself? You're learning to respond rather than react, to observe before speaking, to listen without absorbing what isn't yours to carry. These are not small adjustments. They are leadership disciplines. Leadership doesn't begin with influence. It begins with self-governance. And the fact that you are becoming more selective, more measured, more grounded means that something heavier is approaching. Weight is only given to structures that can support it. So don't misread the silence as absence. Don't interpret the delay as denial. The test you passed didn't end the journey. It qualified you for a deeper one. And as you remain attentive without forcing outcomes, without shrinking to fit old spaces, you'll start to recognize subtle shifts around you, conversations changing, opportunities aligning, expectations rising, because what has changed most significantly is not what you're entering, but who you are becoming in preparation for what comes next. What comes next will not announce itself with urgency. It will feel almost ordinary at first because true responsibility rarely arrives with noise. It enters quietly, testing not your excitement, but your discernment. You will notice that you're being trusted in small ways again. But this time, the weight feels different. Before, small tasks felt heavy because you were still proving endurance. Now they feel light because endurance has already been proven. This is how growth reveals itself. Not by bigger stages, but by deeper capacity. Be careful, no T, to despise the S phase. Many people fail after passing the test because they expect immediate elevation and overlook the subtle increase in influence. Influence grows before position. People begin to listen differently. They pause when you speak. They ask for your perspective, not because you demanded space, but because your presence carries clarity. Clarity is a sign of alignment. Confusion seeks noise. Clarity invites quiet. You're also becoming more aware of boundaries, not walls built from fear, but lines drawn from wisdom. You no longer feel obligated to rescue everyone, explain everything, or fix what is not yours to fix. This is not distance, it is focus. Purpose always narrows vision before it expands reach. And narrowing is uncomfortable because it feels like loss, but in reality, it is refinement. Gold is not made by addition, but by removal. There is a principle woven throughout Scripture that responsibility follows faithfulness in unseen spaces. What you protected in private now qualifies you for trust in public. Not public recognition, but public impact. Impact doesn't need applause to be effective. It needs consistency. And consistency is something you learned when no one was clapping for you. That's why this season feels steadier even when outcomes are still unclear. You are no longer desperate for results because your identity is no longer tied to outcomes. Pay attention to how your prayers are changing. They are less about escape and more about alignment. Less about asking for signs and more about asking for wisdom. That shift reveals maturity. Immature faith asks for relief. Mature faith asks for readiness, and readiness attracts responsibility. The WI stability attracts weight. This is why the next phase will require you to remain grounded, not impressed by speed, not intimidated by silence. You are being positioned to carry something that requires restraint as much as courage, something that will test not whether you can stand under pressure, but whether you can remain whole while carrying influence. And before that is revealed, there will be moments that seem almost too quiet, too slow, as if nothing is happening at all. But beneath that stillness, alignment is tightening, timing is converging, and the next layer of assignment is forming just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when your discernment recognizes it before your emotions do. And when that moment comes, it will not feel dramatic. It will feel inevitable. Not because you forced it, but because something in you will recognize it as familiar. Purpose often feels like recognition more than discovery. You won't feel the need to convince yourself or anyone else. There will be a quiet agreement between your spirit and the responsibility placed in front of you. This is how alignment confirms itself, through peace, not pressure. By now you've learned the difference between urgency and assignment. Urgency demands reaction. Assignment invites response. One drains you, the other steadies you. This discernment didn't come from teaching alone, it came from endurance. You were trained by moments that required you to choose wisdom over impulse, restraint over reaction. That training is now part of you. It shows in how you pause, how you listen, how you move without needing approval. These are not personality traits. They are signs of internal government. In internal government is essential because what you are approaching will expose intention. Influence reveals motives quickly. It magnifies what is already present. That's why the test you pass focused so heavily on character. Skill can open a door, but character determines how long you're trusted beyond it. And trust is the currency of purpose. Without it, even opportunity becomes dangerous. You may notice that distractions are losing their appeal. Things that once consumed your energy now feel shallow. This isn't because you're becoming detached from life. It's because your attention is being preserved. Attention is expensive. Where you place it determines what grows. And right now, your attention is being protected so it can be invested where it matters most. This is preparation, not restriction. There is also a strengthening of conviction happening within you. Not stubbornness, but clarity. You're less easily swayed by opinions, less reactive to misunderstanding. Misunderstanding used to hurt because you needed to be seen accurately. Now it hurts less because you are anchored. Anchored people don't drift when waves rise. They adjust without losing position. That's not emotional numbness, that's maturity. As this anchoring deepens, you'll start to sense a narrowing again. Not in opportunity, but in focus. Certain paths will quietly close. Certain conversations will lose relevance. Certain roles will no longer fit. This is not loss, it is release. Purpose does not multiply options, it clarifies direction. And clarity always requires letting go of what no longer aligns, even if it once served you well. So if you feel a gentle but firm internal nudge towards simplicity, to our depth, toward intentionality, pay attention. That nudge is not rushing you, it's aligning you. Something is being prepared on the other side of your obedience that will require you to move with confidence, not haste, with discernment, not impulse. And before that movement becomes visible, there will be one more quiet stretching of your trust, one more subtle invitation to choose alignment over explanation, setting the stage for what unfolds next. That next stretching will not come through resistance, but through responsibility. You will be asked to carry something without being given full clarity, to act with wisdom before certainty arrives. This is where trust deepens. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in the process that shaped you. By now, you've learned that clarity often follows obedience, not the other way around. And this moment will invite you to move from understanding to embodiment. There will be fewer instructions and more intuition, not impulse, but a quiet knowing refined by experience. This is why your earlier seasons demanded patience. Patience trained your perception. You learned to hear beneath noise, to sense what was misaligned even when it looked acceptable. That sensitivity is not fragility. It's discernment. And discernment becomes essential when responsibility grows more complex. You may notice that people begin projecting expectations onto you. Some will assume strength means availability. Others will assume wisdom means agreement. But part of what you're learning now is selectivity. You cannot carry everything just because you are capable. Capability without boundaries leads to depletion, and depletion clouds judgments. So you are being taught to steward energy as carefully as truth. Stewardship is not selfish, it's strategic. There is also a shift happening in how you define success. Before, success may have been relief, escaping pressure, ending struggle, reaching stability. Now success looks more like faithfulness, remaining aligned regardless of outcome. This is a higher standard, and not many people choose it. That's why so few can be trusted with influence that lasts. Temporary influence is fueled by excitement. Sustained influence is sustained by integrity. You're beginning to understand that not every opportunity is an assignment. Some are tests in disguise. They look good, sound right, and off of speed, but they require you to abandon the very disciplines that brought you here. Those are the moments when discernment must override desire. And because you've already passed a test most people failed, you now recognize that preservation of purpose matters more than acceleration of progress. This season will ask you to remain steady while others rush, to remain clear while others compromise, to remain grounded while others perform. And you will do it without announcing yourself, without demanding recognition, without explaining your restraint, because restraint has already proven itself powerful in your life. It protected you when exposure would have damaged you. It shaped you when affirmation would have distracted you. As this continues, there will be subtle confirmations, not dramatic signs, but quiet alignments. Conversations that open without effort, doors that respond to your presence, not your persuasion. These are signals that internal readiness is being matched by external opportunity. And just before those opportunities fully materialize, you'll sense a deepening call to remain still yet attentive, poised between what you've mastered and what you're about to be entrusted with, standing at the threshold where preparation ends and movement begins. At that threshold, your greatest discipline will be restraint. Not hesitation born of fear, but restraint rooted in wisdom. You will feel the pull to explain yourself, to clarify your intentions, to make sure others understand the depth of what you carry. But this is where silence becomes a form of strength. Explanation is often unnecessary when alignment is evident. Purpose does not argue for its legitimacy. It reveals it through consistency. You are entering a phase where observation matters more than assertion. You will see more than you say. You will discern more than you declare. This is not because your voice lacks value, but because timing now determines impact. Words spoken too early can dilute authority. Actions taken too quickly can misrepresent intention. So you are learning to wait without drawing, to stay present without performing. That balance is rare, and it is cultivated only through experience. There will be moments when you feel underestimated, not dismissed, but not fully seen. This can tempt you to prove yourself. Resist that urge. Proof-seeking is a subtle form of insecurity, and insecurity leaks power. What you carry does not need defending. It needs stewarding. And stewardship requires patience with perception. People catch up when consistency outlasts assumption. You may also notice an increased sensitivity to truth. Not just moral truth, but situational truth. The ability to recognize what fits and what doesn't without needing justification. This sensitivity is sharpening because your role will require precision. Not everything good is appropriate. Not everything available is aligned. Discernment will save you from unnecessary detours that look productive but lead nowhere. In Scripture, those entrusted with influence were often tested in obscurity, then trained in proximity, and only later released into visibility. You are somewhere between proximity and release, close enough to sense what's coming, far enough to remain teachable. This in-between space is uncomfortable because it stretches humility and confidence at the same time. But it is necessary. Confidence without humility becomes control. Humility without confidence becomes hesitation. You are learning to hold both. As you continue to navigate this space, your inner life will matter more than your external pace. What you allow to shape your thinking, your reactions, your rest, will determine how you carry what's next. This is why simplicity is calling you. Not minimalism for its own sake, but focus. Focus creates margin. Margin protects clarity. And clarity preserves purpose. Nothing here is accidental. The timing, the pressure, the quiet, even the unanswered questions are shaping how you move forward. And as you remain attentive, neither rushing ahead nor clinging behind, you will begin to sense that the next demand on your life will not ask whether you are capable, but whether you are willing to move with precision, to act without spectacle, and to step forward carrying authority that has been formed long before it is ever recognized by others. So understand this clearly and let it settle without noise. You were not merely surviving seasons that felt unfair. You were being trusted with them. Heaven does not congratulate noise. It honors weight-bearing strength. You did not pass because you were perfect. You passed because you stayed aligned when it would have been easier to abandon yourself. That alone separates you. Many people pray for purpose, but few remain faithful when purpose begins to shape them. You did. This is why you must not doubt yourself. Now doubt would insult the process that refined you. What you carry was forged under pressure, clarified in silence, and proven without witnesses. You are not behind. You are not overlooked. You are not late. You are positioned. And when the next step requires courage, you will not need to summon it. You will recognize it as familiar because strength has already become your nature.